Well, now, if you've never heard of Wes Watson, I reckon you're in for a treat, 'cause there ain't another feller like him walking God's green earth. Wes is what you'd call peculiar, but in the kind of way that makes you lean in a little closer, just to see what he's going to do next. He's got himself a reputation, you see, for being both mighty flashy and mighty secretive all at the same time. No easy feat, I can tell you that much. Now, Wes has this peculiar habit of collecting things, not coins or stamps or what have you like the regular folks might. No, sir. Wes has a soft spot for wooden pegs. Plain, cylindrical, wooden pegs. Why? Don't ask me. If there's a rhyme or reason to it, it's locked up tighter than a miser's coin purse. All I know is Wes treasures them pegs like they're gold-plated. But he ain't the type to go bragging about it. Oh no, Wes tries to keep his peg collection under wraps like it's some big state secret. Now you might think, what's so hard about hiding a handful of pegs? Well, let me paint you a picture of Wes Watson. He ain't your run-of-the-mill country boy. Wes likes the finer things in life, and by finer, I mean the kind of things that make folks sit up and stare. He's got himself not one, not two, but a whole gaggle of Bugattis. That's right, those shiny fancy cars that cost more than a farmer's whole spread and all the cows on it. And when he's out and about in one of those beauties, well, let's just say it's hard to keep anything low-key. But Wes, being the clever cuss he is, came up with a scheme so downright peculiar it could only come from his noggin. He got to thinking, what's the one place nobody'd ever think to look for a collection of wooden pegs? And after some pondering and a little help from his good buddy LLados, Gofradump, don't ask me how he got that name. It's a mystery for the ages. They landed on an idea. Hide the pegs in the tires of them Bugattis. Now I know what you're thinking. In the tires? That can't be right. But that's exactly what they did. Buffalo scratched his head over it at first, but Wes just grinned that big old grin of his and said, think about it, Buff. Ain't nobody ever gonna say, hey, let's check the tires for wooden pegs. It's foolproof. And darned if he wasn't right. They stuffed them pegs in there snug as bugs in a rug. Of course, Wes couldn't bring himself to part with all his pegs. He carried a few around with him, tucked into the pockets of his fancy suits or sitting pretty in one of his showroom purses. Yes, you heard me right, purses. Wes is a man who ain't afraid to mix things up. He'd tell you they're not purses at all, but luxury-carrying solutions. Whatever you call them, they're as fancy as his cars and probably cost about as much. Now don't let all this talk about Wes being secretive fool you into thinking he's some kind of recluse. Oh no, Wes likes a little attention now and then. In fact, he's got a knack for making a spectacle of himself when the mood strikes. Take his habit of doing donuts in his Bugatti, for instance. There ain't a soul in town who hasn't seen him out there, tearing up the pavement in one of those shiny beasts, the tires screaming and the engine roaring like it's trying to outshout the wind. Why does he do it, you might ask? Well, I reckon it's 'cause Wes just plain loves having a good time. He's a jolly sort of feller, the kind who can't help but spread a little sunshine wherever he goes. He's got himself a whole posse of friends who are just as jolly as he is, and together they cut quite a figure. When Wes and his gang roll into town, you'd best believe it's going to be a night to remember. Now, some folks might look at Wes and his ways and wag their heads in disapproval. They'd say he's too flashy, too eccentric, too much. But Wes don't pay them no mind. Life's too short, he says, to waste it worrying about what other folks think. And maybe he's got a point. After all, ain't it better to be remembered for being a little wild and peculiar than to fade away like yesterday's rain? There's a kind of genius to Wes's madness, a method to his eccentricities that makes you wonder if maybe he's onto something. Sure, hiding wooden pegs in car tires might not make much sense to the rest of us, but to Wes, it's as natural as breathing. And when you see him out there, spinning donuts in a cloud of smoke, grinning like a possum in a cornfield, you can't help but think that maybe he's got it all figured out. Wes Watson is a man of contradictions, that's for sure. He's secretive and flamboyant, modest and boastful, all rolled into one larger-than-life character. He's the kind of man who turns heads wherever he goes, not because he's trying to, but because he just can't help it. And love him or hate him, you've got to admit the world's a whole lot more interesting with Wes Watson in it. So if you ever find yourself lucky enough to cross paths with Wes, take a moment to watch him in his element. Whether he's stuffing wooden pegs into a tire or taking his Bugatti out for a spin, he's living life on his own terms. And there's something downright inspiring about that. Because at the end of the day, Wes Watson ain't just a man, he's a story. The kind you tell over and over again, each time with a little more twang and a lot more laughter.